Christine, 34. I never imagined Christmas 2024 would be the day my own family destroyed me. We were all seated at the table I had decorated, eating the food I had prepared, in the house I had paid $287,150 for over the past 8 years. As everyone raised their glasses for a toast, my mother looked directly at me and said words I'll never forget. "Your presence here is a disgrace to us." I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I didn't shed a single tear. I just smiled, finished my wine, and walked out of the room. That night, I made one phone call. The next morning, I set in motion a plan that would change our lives forever. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Growing up as the oldest child in my family, I learned early that my role was to be the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never caused problems. Even as a little girl, I knew the expectations were different for me than for my brother. My parents weren't subtle about it. While my brother Jason got praise for the smallest accomplishments, my achievements were expected, required. When I brought home straight A's, my father would nod and say, "Good job, keep it up." When Jason managed a B, my parents would celebrate by taking us all out to dinner. "Your brother needs more encouragement," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the difference. "You're naturally gifted, Christine. You don't need the same kind of support." By 18, I was working part-time to pay for my own car insurance and clothes. Jason, meanwhile, received a brand new car for his 16th birthday. "He needs reliable transportation for his social development," my father said, as if I hadn't spent years taking the bus to my after-school job. I put myself through college with scholarships, student loans, and working 30 hours a week. I graduated with honors and $42,000 in student debt. 2 years later, my parents paid for Jason's entire education at a private university, tuition, housing, a monthly allowance, everything. "We didn't have the money when you were in school," they explained. After college, I landed a job at a financial firm. I worked 70-hour weeks, rising quickly through the ranks. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, driving a 10-year-old car, paying down my student loans aggressively while saving for my future. My brother? He bounced between jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. "Jason is finding himself," my mother would say. "He's a free spirit." Then, in 2016, everything changed. My parents called me in tears. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure. They needed help. "It's just temporary," my father promised. "Just until we get back on our feet." Without hesitation, I agreed to help. I had just received a promotion and a decent raise. I could handle the $3,450 monthly mortgage payment if I continued living frugally. After all, they were my parents. They had raised me. Surely they appreciated what I was doing for them. 8 years and nearly $300,000 later, I was still making those payments. My parents had never resumed contributing a single dollar. Instead, they had allowed my brother to move into the basement temporarily 5 years ago, where he lived rent-free while working part-time at a local music store. "Jason keeps us company," my mother said when I suggested he could contribute something. "That's his payment." I never pushed back, never complained. I believed family meant supporting each other, and I was proud to be able to help my parents keep their home. Besides, my career was going well. I could afford it, even if it meant delaying my own dreams of homeownership. Every month, I transferred the mortgage payment directly to the bank. Every holiday, I drove to their house with armfuls of gifts and groceries. Every family dinner, I smiled through the subtle jabs about my single status, my devotion to work, my coldness. "Christine is so serious," my mother would tell relatives. "Always has been. Not like our Jason, he knows how to enjoy life." I never realized how much resentment was building inside me. How could I? I'd spent my entire life pushing those feelings down, believing they were wrong, selfish, unworthy, until that Christmas day when everything finally broke. The invisible daughter. I grew up being the responsible one, while my younger brother, Jason, was the special one. From my earliest memories, my parents justified everything. "Jason needs more attention. Jason is sensitive. Jason has potential." I was the one with perfect grades, working part-time during high school, and paying for my own college. Every achievement of mine was met with a nod and immediate pivot to my brother. Christine got into Cornell with a scholarship. Now let's talk about how to help Jason improve his C average. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They just took me for granted. When I graduated with honors in finance, my parents attended the ceremony but left early to make it to Jason's band performance. "He gets so nervous without us there," my mother explained as they hurried out. I stood alone, clutching my diploma, watching other families take photos together. Jason had everything paid for tuition, apartment, Even a new car when he graduated in business administration, only to quit 3 jobs in his first year. Meanwhile, I built my career in finance, saving every penny. Some people are just meant to work hard, my father once told me, as if my ambition was some kind of character flaw rather than a strength. Jason is more creative. My brother's creativity apparently extended to creative excuses. He quit his first job because his boss didn't understand his vision. The second because the hours were crushing his spirit. The third because he wanted to explore his options. Through it all, my parents supported him emotionally and financially. When he couldn't make rent, they paid it. When he wanted to attend a music festival instead of looking for work, they funded the trip. He needs experiences to find his path, they explained. I bought my first car with money I'd saved working weekends and summers since I was 16. It was used, reliable, nothing fancy. Jason's first car was brand new, a high-end model with all the extras, a gift for passing his driving test on the 3rd try. You have to understand, my mother said when I questioned the disparity. Your brother needs the confidence boost. You've always been so capable. When my parents faced foreclosure in 2016, it was me they turned to. Without hesitation, I took over the mortgage payments on the family home, $3,450 each month, while living in a 1-bedroom apartment to save money, just until we stabilize, they promised. 8 years and almost $300,000 later, I was still paying, while my brother lived in the basement, temporarily, for 5 years. I remembered the day they called me about the mortgage. I was at work, in the middle of an important meeting. I stepped out to take the call and heard my mother crying. We're going to lose the house, Christine. We don't know what to do. My father got on the phone, his voice heavy with shame. I never wanted to ask you for this, but we have nowhere else to turn. Jason can't help you know how he struggles. That night, I looked at my bank accounts, my budget, my 5-year plan to buy my own home. I calculated what taking on their mortgage would mean, postponing my own home purchase, continuing to live in my small apartment, cutting back on my already modest lifestyle. I did it anyway. Family comes first, I told myself. They would do the same for me. The first year, I visited every weekend, helping with maintenance and repairs. I replaced the dishwasher when it broke, paid for a plumber when the basement flooded, funded a new roof when the old one started leaking, $32,000 in repairs that first year alone, another $15,000 for a new heating system the following winter. My parents thanked me, of course, for the first few months. Then the thanks became less frequent, eventually stopping altogether. My financial support became expected, like the sun rising each morning. Meanwhile, Jason continued his pattern of starting jobs and quitting them, starting relationships and ending them, starting projects and abandoning them. He moved into the basement, just until I get back on my feet 5 years ago. He contributed nothing to the household expenses, not even his own food. Your brother is finding himself, my mother would say, whenever I gently suggested he could help with utilities at least. Not everyone has your financial stability, Christine. As if my stability was some accident of fate rather than the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. Despite my professional expertise in finance, I handled my personal finances with my family completely differently. At work, I was meticulous, demanding proper documentation and clear terms. At home, I accepted vague promises and informal arrangements. It was as if crossing the threshold of my parents' house transformed me from a savvy financial executive back into a little girl desperate for approval. The eternal caretaker. Despite everything, I kept trying to prove my worth. I organized every holiday, drove 3 hours to their house each month to help with maintenance and cleaning, and sent gifts for every occasion. When my father needed knee surgery, I took 2 weeks of vacation time to care for him. Christine always handles everything, they told neighbors, not as a compliment but as justification for never thanking me. Meanwhile, Jason was congratulated just for showing up to family dinners, usually late, often hungover. You know how hard it is for him to commit, my mother would justify. He's a free spirit, like your father was when young. You were born an adult, Christine. You don't need as much support. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room during my father's surgery. 6 hours, I sat there alone, answering work emails on my laptop between anxious glances at the door. My mother couldn't come. She had a book club meeting she didn't want to miss. Jason was working, though his shift had mysteriously ended by the time I brought Dad home. For the next 2 weeks, I slept on their couch, administered medications, changed bandages, prepared meals, drove Dad to physical therapy appointments, and handled the insurance paperwork. My mother flitted in and out, always with somewhere more important to be. Jason appeared occasionally, usually around dinner time, always leaving before the dishes needed washing. The day before I returned to work, my father patted my hand and said, "Thanks for everything. Kiddo, we'd be lost without you." It was the closest thing to appreciation I'd received. and I treasured it. That evening, I overheard my mother on the phone with her sister. Yes, Christine's been here. You know how she is, has to control everything. Barely let me near him. I'll be glad to have my house back tomorrow. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to process what I'd heard. In my mother's version of events, I wasn't the devoted daughter who'd put her life on hold to help. I was an intrusion, a control freak, someone to be tolerated rather than appreciated. Yet I kept coming back, for birthdays, for anniversaries, for random Sunday dinners. I brought gifts, I cooked meals, I fixed things around the house. I hoped, somewhere deep inside, that eventually they would see me, really see me. Christine always gives the nicest presents, my mother would comment to relatives, holding up whatever carefully selected gift I'd brought. She can afford to, with that job of hers. As if my career was some kind of happy accident rather than the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. As if my financial stability somehow devalued my generosity. Meanwhile, Jason was praised for showing up with a gas station greeting card. Look, he made time for us even though he's so busy. Isn't that sweet? Jason has a natural warmth that people respond to, my mother once told me when I asked why he was the favorite. You're more reserved, practical. People need to be warmed, Christine, not managed. I tried to be warmer, more spontaneous, less practical, but it never seemed to work. The roles had been cast long ago and we were all just playing our parts. Who else has always had to be the responsible adult in the family? Comment if you can relate. My friends noticed the imbalance long before I allowed myself to acknowledge it. My best friend Sophia questioned it constantly. Why are you still paying their mortgage? She asked over brunch one Sunday. It's been what, 7 years now? 8? They're my parents, I said, the familiar justification ready on my lips. What am I supposed to do? Let them lose their home? They're taking advantage of you, Chris. And what about your brother? Why isn't he helping? I stirred my coffee, avoiding her eyes. Jason isn't financially stable. Because he doesn't have to be, Sophia said flatly. Why would he get his act together when you're there to bail everyone out? When the 5-year mark of my mortgage payments passed, I casually mentioned the co-ownership agreement to my father. So about that paperwork we signed. It's been 5 years now. He waved dismissively. Those papers are being processed. Legal stuff takes time. Don't worry about it. I accepted his explanation, as always, to avoid conflict. In retrospect, I should have pressed harder, should have demanded to see documentation. But that would have meant confrontation, and confrontation wasn't my role in the family. Instead, I focused on work, on building my career, on proving my worth through achievement since I couldn't seem to earn their approval any other way. I received another promotion, executive level this time, with a significant raise. I didn't tell my family immediately. Somehow, I knew that the news would be met not with pride, but with increased expectations. Another reason why I could afford to keep supporting them. When I finally mentioned it during a family dinner, my mother's first response was, "Does this mean you'll be even busier now? You already hardly visit." My father's was, "That's great, honey. Now, did I tell you about Jason's new business idea? He needs some startup capital." I looked across the table at my brother, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but not embarrassed enough to refuse when I later wrote him a check for $5,000 to fund whatever his latest scheme was, a homemade hot sauce business that would fizzle out within months. The discovery. It was Christmas Eve, and I had gone early to prepare the house. While searching for decorations in my father's office, I found a folder marked House Matters. Inside were documents signed 3 months earlier, transferring property ownership to Jason. My heart stopped. I recognized my parents' signatures and the notaries. The house, the same house I had been faithfully paying for, now legally belonged to my brother. There was no mention of my name anywhere. No one had consulted me, despite every payment coming from my bank account for nearly a decade. I sat down hard in my father's leather chair, the papers trembling in my hands. The date on the transfer was October 12th, just 3 months ago. The same week I had paid for a new water heater installation. The same month I had sent them an extra $2,000 for property taxes. The document was clear. Transfer of full ownership rights to Jason Michael Reynolds. There was a clause specifying that my parents retained the right to live in the home for the remainder of their lives, but ownership had been completely signed over to my brother. This discovery wasn't entirely shocking. In the past few months, I'd noticed subtle changes in my parents' behavior, strange comments about the house being Jason's future, and questions about my willingness to continue helping. These hints had put me on alert, so when I went looking for decorations, I was also searching for answers. Normally, my father kept his office locked, but today, distracted with Christmas preparations, he had left the door open and the desk drawer key in the lock. I knew I should respect his privacy, but something compelled me to look. I kept searching, now determined to find more. In the back of the drawer, there was an old folder marked Agreements 2016. There, it was the document I knew existed but had never received a copy of. The written agreement my father and I had signed when I started paying the mortgage. It clearly established that my payments were considered equity participation, and that any decision regarding the house would require my consent. Most importantly, there was a clause stating that after 5 years of continuous payments, I would become an official co-owner of the house, a promise that was never fulfilled and was now being deliberately violated. The agreement I found hadn't been registered officially. My father had convinced me that a document between family would be sufficient. As so many times before, I had accepted his word without questioning. Another mistake born from my desperate need for his approval. With shaking hands, I took photos of all the documents with my phone, including the original agreement. I also found and photographed receipts for all the improvements I had financed: $32,000 in roof and plumbing repairs, $15,000 for the new heating system, $8,000 for kitchen appliances, $12,000 for landscaping and driveway repaving, nearly $70,000 in home improvements, all paid from my account. I put everything back exactly as I found it and continued preparing the Christmas dinner as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was reeling. Every sacrifice I had made, every vacation I hadn't taken, every opportunity I had passed up to help my family, it all felt like a cruel joke now. For 8 years, I had believed I was working towards something, that my financial contributions were being recognized even if my emotional needs weren't, that at the very least I was building equity in a property as I paid its mortgage. It had all been a lie. I moved through the kitchen on autopilot, preparing the turkey, chopping vegetables, setting the table. My mind was racing. What would I do with this information? Confront them immediately? Wait and consult with a lawyer first? Continue as if I knew nothing? A text came through from Jason. "Running late as usual, sis. Save me some of the good wine." I stared at my phone, this sudden insight into my brother's character making me see his message differently. The casual expectation that I would understand, accommodate, forgive. The assumption that I would, as always, have everything ready and waiting for his arrival. For the first time, I saw clearly what had been happening all these years. I wasn't the responsible one because I was born that way. I was the responsible one because someone had to be, and it was convenient for everyone if that someone was me. I thought about all the moments that should have been mine to celebrate my graduation, my promotions, my achievements that had been overshadowed by Jason's needs. All the times I had swallowed my disappointment when my parents missed my important events, but rearranged their schedules for his. It's just who they are, I had told myself for years. They love us both, just differently. But now, with the evidence literally in my hands, I couldn't maintain that fiction any longer. This wasn't about different parenting styles or personality conflicts. This was betrayal, pure and simple. The validation. With trembling hands, I called my best friend, Sophia. "They can't do that," she said immediately, the indignation in her voice validating my feelings. "It's fraud, Christine. You have proof of payment and the written agreement, but they've already transferred the property to Jason," I replied. "I don't know if I can legally do anything. Maybe it's too late." "That doesn't matter," Sophia insisted. "Call my cousin the lawyer, now." Reluctantly, I called the lawyer that same evening. I was certain he would tell me I had no options. "Actually, you have a very strong case," he said to my surprise. "That agreement you signed is legally binding, and the fact that you've continued making payments for 8 years establishes a clear pattern. But I don't understand real estate law. What can I really do against a transfer that's already been registered?" "There are several options," he explained patiently. "We can file a lawsuit for breach of contract, contest the transfer as fraudulent, and request an injunction to protect your interests in the property. It won't be quick or easy, but you have documentation that many people in your situation don't have." He instructed me to continue as if nothing had happened during Christmas. "Come to my office after the holiday with all your banking records from the past 8 years and any documentation related to the improvements you made to the house." The lawyer paused, then added, "You work in finance, right? In corporate finance?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I'm an executive at—" "And you didn't document this arrangement more thoroughly?" He sounded surprised. I laughed without humor. "The zapatero always has the worst shoes. That's Portuguese for the cobbler has the worst shoes. And when it comes to family, financial logic often disappears." He nodded understandingly. "I see it all the time. Professionals who are meticulous at work but let their guard down with family. It's not unusual." That night, I cried myself to sleep, replaying every sacrifice I had made, every opportunity I had passed up to help my family, the same family that had betrayed me. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up feeling hollowed out, empty. I had cried until there were no tears left, and in their place was a strange, cold clarity. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing the red dress I had bought for the occasion. I applied my makeup with extra care, covering the shadows under my eyes. No one looking at me would guess I had spent the night in tears, my world crumbling around me. In my car, I stared at the pile of presents on the passenger seat. Carefully selected, beautifully wrapped gifts for the people who had betrayed me. Part of me wanted to leave them there, to show up empty-handed for once. But that would tip my hand too early. Better to play the role they expected, reliable Christine, always doing the right thing while I figured out my next move. At the house, their house, Jason's house. Definitely not my house. Despite the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had invested in it, I plastered on a smile and began unloading the car. Turkey, sides, desserts, gifts, decorations, everything perfect as always. My mother greeted me at the door. "You're late," she said, though I was right on time. "We were about to call you." "Sorry," I said automatically. Traffic was bad. She didn't offer to help with the bags. Instead, she returned to the living room where my father and my Uncle Frank were watching a football game. Uncle Frank had always been just like my father, indulging Jason and dismissing my achievements with casual indifference. It was no surprise to see him there, another silent enabler of the family dynamic. As I prepared the final touches for dinner, arranging the food on the serving platters I had bought last Christmas, my mind kept returning to the documents I had discovered. The betrayal felt fresh with each thought, a wound repeatedly reopened. Jason arrived an hour late, as usual. He bounded into the kitchen, helped himself to a glass of the expensive wine I had brought, and gave me a casual side hug. "Smells amazing. Sis, you've outdone yourself again." I smiled tightly. "Thanks. Hey, do you think you could help me out with my car payment this month?" "Just temporarily. Things are a little tight." I looked at my brother, this person who now owned the house I had been paying for, and something inside me shifted. For 8 years, I had been saying yes. Yes to the mortgage payments. Yes to the repairs. Yes to the loans that were never repaid. Yes to the emotional labor of planning every holiday and family gathering. What would happen if, just once, I said no? "I can't this month," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "I have some unexpected expenses." Jason's face registered surprise, then annoyance. "Seriously? It's just a few $100. I know you have it." I said no, Jason. My brother stared at me for a moment, then shrugged. "Whatever. I'll figure it out." He wandered off with his wine, leaving me alone in the kitchen. That small refusal felt like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back years of resentment and pain. A trickle now, but I knew the pressure building behind it would eventually break through completely. The decision. On Christmas morning, I woke with a clarity I'd never felt before. I'd spent years saving to eventually buy my own home, postponing my life to support theirs. I watched friends buy houses, travel, start families, while I remained stuck in the same cycle of giving and never receiving. I analyzed my finances. $287,353 in mortgage payments, $47,000 in home improvements, countless expensive gifts and prepared dinners, all for people who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. I looked at my phone, at the photos of the documents, including the signed agreement, and made my decision. I would go to the Christmas dinner. I would maintain my dignity. And afterward, my life would change forever. 8 years of my life. 8 years of my career. 8 years of financial sacrifice. What did I have to show for it? A small apartment filled with IKEA furniture because I couldn't justify spending money on myself while paying for my parents' lifestyle. A savings account that should have been much larger. A retirement fund that could have been growing faster. I thought about my colleagues, many younger than me, who had bought homes, taken exotic vacations, started families, all things I had put on hold because family comes first. But what happens when your family puts you last? I pulled out my laptop and created a spreadsheet, something I should have done years ago. I entered every mortgage payment, $3,450 per month for 96 months. I added the home improvements, $32,000 for roof and plumbing, $15,000 for the heating system, $8,000 for kitchen appliances, $12,000 for landscaping and driveway repaving. I tallied the property taxes I had covered, $4,200 per year for 8 years. The insurance premiums, the maintenance costs. The total made me physically ill, $384,693. Enough for a substantial down payment on my own house. Enough for a graduate degree. Enough to have taken a year off to travel. Enough to have started my own business. Instead, I had poured it into a house that was now legally my brother's property. I thought about my future. If nothing changed, what would the next 8 years look like? More of the same? Would I still be paying their mortgage at 42? At 50? When would it end? The truth hit me with stunning clarity. It would never end unless I ended it. I had been raised to believe that self-sacrifice was a virtue. That putting others' needs before my own made me a good person. That family loyalty meant giving until it hurt, and then giving more. But sitting there, staring at the cold, hard numbers, I realized something profound. My parents hadn't taught Jason those same lessons. They hadn't expected him to sacrifice his comfort, his dreams, his future for the family. Only me. Why had I accepted this double standard for so long? Because I was seeking their approval, their love, their recognition. I had been trying to earn what should have been freely given. No more. I deserved better. I deserved a family that valued my contributions. I deserved reciprocity, respect, appreciation. And if my blood relatives couldn't provide that, perhaps it was time to redefine what family meant to me. I looked again at the photos of the documents on my phone, the transfer of ownership to Jason, the violated agreement, the evidence of my years of financial support. I would go to Christmas dinner. I would smile. I would be polite. I would give no indication that anything had changed, and then I would take back my power. Who's ever had that moment of clarity when you realized you were being used? Type enough in the comments if you've reached your limit. I made a list of what I would need. 8 years of bank statements showing the mortgage payments, receipts for all home improvements, the original agreement, my parents' contact information, Jason's contact information, the name of the lawyer I would consult. A sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own destiny. No more seeking approval that would never come. No more trying to prove my worth through endless sacrifice. No more accepting scraps of affection when I deserved a full place at the table. I would still help my parents if they truly needed it. I wasn't cruel or vindictive, but that help would come with boundaries, with expectations, with reciprocity. And Jason? My brother would finally have to face the reality of adulthood, the responsibility that comes with property ownership, the consequences of his choices. As I dressed for Christmas dinner, I looked at myself in the mirror. I had always been attractive in a conventional way, tall, slim, with my father's blue eyes and my mother's dark hair, but stress and resentment had taken their toll. There were shadows under my eyes, tension lines around my mouth, a perpetual furrow between my brows. No more, I told my reflection. This is the last Christmas you'll spend being taken for granted. My reflection stared back, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of hope in my eyes. Not just hope, determination, resolve, strength. I was Christine Reynolds. I was a successful financial executive. I was smart, capable, resilient. I had built a career from nothing, put myself through college, risen through the ranks through hard work and intelligence. I was not a doormat. I was not an ATM. I was not an afterthought. And after today, no one in my family would ever treat me as such again. The plan. Before going to dinner, I called the lawyer again, discussing next steps and what I could realistically and legally expect. It will take time, he warned. Real estate disputes are rarely quick, especially when they involve family members and conflicting documents. How long? Depending on how aggressively they contest it, we could be talking 6 to 12 months for a complete resolution. However, we can request interim measures much more quickly. Because of the violated written agreement, the documentation of all my payments, and the improvements I made to the house, I had a solid legal basis to contest the property transfer. Can I recover my investment? I asked. There are a few possible scenarios, he explained. We can file a lawsuit contesting the fraudulent transfer and demanding enforcement of the original agreement, which would give you co-ownership rights. Or we can seek financial compensation for the full value of your investments, plus interest. A third option would be to seek the sale of the property and fair division of the proceeds. Your case is strong, he added, but I must be honest, family property disputes are notoriously unpredictable. Judges have wide discretion, and emotions complicate everything. I can't guarantee any particular outcome. He mentioned he knew a real estate investor who frequently worked with similar cases. He might be interested in offering a quicker solution, buying the property at fair market value once we resolve the legal issues. Let me warn you, he added. Despite the strength of our case, these disputes can drag on for years in some cases. The fact that we have an investor interested in purchasing the property could significantly accelerate the process. I made some calls. The investor was interested, but cautious. I can make a conditional offer, he explained, but it will be below market value due to the legal risks involved. These disputes can drag on for years. I put on my best dress, applied perfect makeup, and drove to the house I had financed for so long. knowing it would be the last time I would set foot in it as family. As I pulled into the driveway, memories washed over me. The summer afternoons helping my father plant the garden, the winter mornings shoveling snow from the walkway while Jason slept in, the countless holidays spent cooking in the kitchen while my mother entertained guests in the living room. This house held so many moments of my life, so many hopes, so many disappointments. I had called the lawyer again that morning, after a night of restless sleep. "What exactly are my options?" I asked. "Based on what you've told me and the documents you've photographed, we have several strong arguments," he said. "First, there's the breach of contract, the written agreement your father signed promising you co-ownership after 5 years of payments, which they violated by transferring the property to your brother. Second, there's the issue of unjust enrichment. You've contributed nearly $400,000 to a property that's now in someone else's name without receiving any compensation or equity. Third, there's the potential for a constructive trust argument essentially claiming that your brother holds the property in trust for you based on your financial contributions." "Which is strongest?" I asked. "All have merit, but the breach of contract is the most straightforward. We have a written document signed by your father explicitly stating you would become co-owner after 5 years of payments. That's clear and definitive. What's our first step? We file for an injunction to prevent any further transfer of the property and to put a hold on any potential sale. Then we file the main lawsuit for breach of contract, seeking either specific performance, meaning they have to honor the original agreement and make you co-owner, or financial damages equal to your contributions plus interest. How quickly can we file?" "I can have the paperwork ready the day after Christmas. We can file as soon as the courts reopen." "Do it," I said, the decision lifting a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "And what about the mortgage payments going forward?" "Once we file the lawsuit, you should stop making those payments. There's no legal obligation for you to continue paying a mortgage on a property that's been transferred to someone else without your consent. Won't that hurt my parents?" "Possibly," he acknowledged. "But legally speaking, the mortgage is their responsibility, not yours. If they can't make the payments, that becomes a problem for them and for Jason as the new owner, not for you." I thought about that as I sat in my car in the driveway. My parents had made their choice. They had chosen to betray me, to take my financial support for granted, to transfer the house to Jason behind my back while I was still paying for it. Actions have consequences. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bags of food and gifts I had brought, and walked to the front door. One last Christmas dinner, one last performance as the dutiful daughter. Then everything would change. The confrontation. The dinner began like always. My parents praising every little thing Jason did. "You brought wine, how thoughtful," while my contributions were expected. The table I decorated, the food I cooked, the gifts I bought all taken for granted. Tension built throughout the meal. Little digs about my work, comments about how I never had time for family, despite being there, organizing everything as always. "Why don't you ever bring anyone to family dinners, Christine?" my mother asked, not for the first time. "You're already 34. Jason at least has had some relationships. Relationships that ended when girlfriends realized he had no ambition," I thought, but just smiled. "I work a lot," I replied. "That's the problem," my father chimed in. "You always put work and money above family." Then came the toast. My father raised his glass. To family, and to the bright future ahead now that this house is secured for the next generation. "What do you mean?" I asked innocently, though I already knew the answer. "Oh, didn't we tell you?" My mother smiled. "We transferred the house to Jason. He'll take care of us when we're older since you're always so busy with your career." "And the mortgage payments?" I asked, still keeping calm. "You've paid for so long, a few more years won't make a difference," Jason said casually. "Besides, you've always been obsessed with money." That's when my mother said those words. "It's always about money with you, isn't it? That's why your presence here is a disgrace to us. Always calculating, always materialistic. Jason understands the true meaning of family." Jason smiled that smug smile, raising his glass in agreement. No one, not a single person at the table defended me. The room seemed to freeze. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the distant sound of a neighbor's Christmas music, the soft clink of silverware against plates. My mother's words hung in the air between us, sharp and cruel and irrevocable. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the sheer, stunning hypocrisy. I had given them nearly $400,000. I had postponed my own life goals to support theirs. I had shown up again and again with financial help, with physical labor, with emotional support, and this was what they thought of me. I looked around the table. My father, suddenly interested in his plate, avoiding my eyes. My brother, still wearing that smug smile, enjoying my humiliation. My mother, chin raised defiantly, daring me to make a scene. I could have exploded, could have listed every payment, every sacrifice, every moment I had put them before myself, could have flipped the table, thrown the crystal goblets against the wall, screamed until my throat was raw. Instead, I smiled, a small, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. I raised my wine glass. To family, I echoed, my voice steady. And to finally seeing people for who they truly are. I drained my glass in one long swallow, set it gently on the table, and stood. Christine, my father began, his voice uncertain. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, I said pleasantly. And your house. I walked out of the dining room, head high, back straight. I could hear them behind me, my mother's indignant huffing, my father's chair scraping back, Jason's confused, "What's her problem?" In the hallway, I paused by the family photos lining the wall. Photos where Jason was always center frame, always the focus, while I stood to the side. The visual evidence of what I had always known but never fully acknowledged. I had never been a priority, never been valued, never been seen. My father caught up to me at the front door. "Christine, wait. Your mother didn't mean—" "Yes, she did," I interrupted, my voice calm. "She meant every word. And so did you, with your toast about securing the house for the next generation, meaning Jason, not me, despite the fact that I'm the one who's been paying for it." His face paled. "We were going to tell you about the transfer. It just never seemed like the right time." "When would have been the right time? Dad? Before you did it? After the 8th year of me making payments? Or never you just hoped I wouldn't find out?" "It's complicated," he stammered. Jason needs, I echoed. "It's always about what Jason needs. What about what I need? What about what I've earned? What about the agreement we signed? Promising me co-ownership after 5 years of payments?" His eyes widened. "How did you—" "I found it," I said simply. "In your office, along with the transfer documents. Merry Christmas to me, right?" I opened the front door, letting in a blast of cold December air. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I continued, my voice still eerily calm. "The transfer to Jason was illegal given our prior agreement. You'll be hearing from my attorney after the holidays." "You wouldn't sue your own family," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I looked at him, really looked at him for what felt like the first time. The father I had idolized, whose approval I had sought my entire life. He suddenly seemed smaller, diminished. "You stopped being my family the moment you betrayed me," I said quietly. "You're just people I'm related to now." I walked out into the night, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name, her voice sharp with anger, not concern. I didn't look back. The manipulation. After my mother's comment, I just smiled, finished my wine, and left the room. My father followed me to the porch. "She didn't mean that, honey," he tried. "You know how emotional your mother gets during the holidays. Besides, it makes sense for the house to go to Jason. He'll never leave, while you have your apartment and career. It's for the family's good." I looked at my father, the man I'd respected, who I thought valued me, and saw for the first time what he really thought of me. A walking bank account. "I understand perfectly," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "By the way, I found our agreement about the house while looking for decorations. Remember? The one stating I should be co-owner after 5 years of payments?" His face paled. "That was just a formality, Christine. It wasn't meant to be taken so seriously." "Interesting. My lawyer thinks it's quite serious." "Actually—" "Lawyer? What lawyer? What have you done?" "Merry Christmas, Dad." He grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. "You can't do this, Christine. We're your parents. We raised you." I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "And I've been paying your mortgage for 8 years. I'd say we're even." "It's not about the money," he insisted, his voice rising. "It's about family loyalty." "Loyalty?" I laughed, the sound brittle in the cold night air. "Where was your loyalty when you transferred the house to Jason behind my back? Where was your loyalty when you violated our written agreement?" "You've always been so dramatic," he said, changing tactics, "making everything into a federal case. This is why your mother gets frustrated with you." I recognized the manipulation technique he'd been using it my entire life. Make me doubt myself. Make me question my reactions. Make me feel guilty for having legitimate feelings. Not anymore. "Call it whatever you want, Dad. The fact remains, you and Mom transferred the house to Jason while I was still paying the mortgage. That's not just disloyal, it's fraud." His face hardened. "So that's it? You're going to punish us over a misunderstanding? Ruin the family over some legal technicality?" "The family was ruined the moment you decided I was worth less than Jason," I said quietly. "I'm just acknowledging what's already happened." I turned to leave again, and this time he didn't try to stop me. but his voice followed me down the steps. If you do this, Christine, there's no coming back. You'll lose your family forever. I paused, not turning around. I lost my family the day you signed those transfer papers. Dad, I just didn't know it yet. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from my mother, my father, even Jason. I ignored them all. At home, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a generous glass of whiskey. Then I opened my laptop and composed an email to the lawyer, confirming our appointment for the day after Christmas. My phone rang my mother. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. This time, I turned it off completely. I needed space to think, to process, to plan my next move without their voices in my head. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from my parents, increasingly frantic, then angry, then pleading. A few were from Jason, alternating between confusion, what's going on, and accusation, why are you upsetting mom and dad? I read them all, then composed a single reply to my father. Any further communication should go through my lawyer. I'll send his contact information tomorrow. His response came within seconds. Christine, please. We can talk about this as a family. No need for lawyers. I didn't respond. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. I didn't open the door. Christine, we know you're in there, my mother called. Open the door. We need to talk. I remained silent. This is ridiculous, she continued, her voice rising. You're acting like a child. Open the door right now. Still, I said nothing. Your father is very upset, she tried next, changing tactics. His blood pressure is through the roof. Is that what you want? To give him a heart attack at Christmas? The emotional manipulation was so transparent now that I had finally recognized it for what it was. For years, they had used guilt, obligation, and family ties to control me, to extract what they wanted: my time, my money, my self-respect. We're not leaving until you talk to us, my father called next. I picked up my phone and texted my building's security desk. Within minutes, I heard the elevator ding and the measured tread of the security guard's footsteps. Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, I heard him say. Ms. Reynolds has requested that you not disturb her. This is absurd, my mother protested. We're her parents. I understand, ma'am, but this is private property, and Ms. Reynolds has asked that you leave. If you don't comply, I'll have to escort you out of the building. There was a moment of tense silence. Then the sound of retreating footsteps and the elevator doors opening and closing. My phone buzzed with a text from the security guard. They're gone, Ms. Reynolds. Would you like me to prevent them from coming up if they return? Yes, please, I replied. Thank you, Marcus. I spent the rest of Christmas Day alone, something I had never done before. I ordered Chinese food, opened a bottle of good wine, and watched old movies that had nothing to do with Christmas or family or obligation. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The liberation. The following week, my lawyer filed a lawsuit contesting the property transfer, citing the violated agreement and presenting evidence of my years of payments. The court granted a temporary injunction preventing any voluntary sale or transfer of the property while the case was under review. This doesn't prevent the bank from initiating foreclosure if payments stop, my lawyer explained. In fact, that might accelerate the resolution, since no one wants to lose the property to the bank. The legal process would be lengthy months, perhaps a year, but each step gave me more strength. I immediately stopped making mortgage payments. Why continue paying for a house that had been secretly transferred to my brother? Through the discovery process, I learned something shocking. My parents had refinanced the house twice in the past few years, taking out equity for home improvements that never materialized. They had used my consistent payments as proof of financial capacity for these refinancings, presenting my bank deposits as their own income. That explained why, despite my payments totaling $287,453, the mortgage balance remained stubbornly high at $320,000. They'd been using the house as an ATM, borrowing against it while I faithfully made the payments. My phone rang incessantly, Jason, demanding I apologize to our mother for ruining Christmas. My father, trying to convince me to be reasonable and continue paying the mortgage while we discussed the property transfer. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer. I sent a single message. Any communication must be through my attorney. I wish you all the best. Then I blocked their numbers and focused on the next chapter of my life, a chapter where I would be the priority. Who has ever cut contact with toxic people and felt that immediate relief? Share your experience in the comments. The first month was the hardest. Years of conditioning had trained me to put my family's needs above my own, to answer their calls immediately, to drop everything when they needed something. Breaking those patterns felt physically painful at times. like detoxing from an addiction. I'd reach for my phone to check if they'd called, then remember I'd blocked their numbers. I'd see something at a store that my mother would like and have to stop myself from buying it. I'd have a success at work and instinctively want to tell my father before remembering the betrayal. It's normal, my therapist assured me during our weekly sessions. You're grieving the family you thought you had, the relationship you wanted with your parents. Give yourself time to process that loss. So I did. I threw myself into work, earned another promotion, started taking classes toward an MBA. I joined a hiking club, made new friends, went on a few dates. I began researching neighborhoods where I might eventually buy my own home, a home that would be truly mine, paid for with my money, owned in my name. The mortgage company sent notices to my parents' address. My lawyer received increasingly desperate communications from their attorney, asking me to resume payments while we work through this unfortunate misunderstanding. I did not resume payments. 3 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, I received a formal notice from the court. My parents and Jason had countersued, claiming that my payments had been gifts with no expectation of ownership or repayment. My lawyer was unconcerned. This is standard procedure, he explained. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. With the documentation we have, particularly that signed agreement, their position is weak. Still, the lawsuit dragged on. Depositions were taken, discovery requests were filed, the legal bills mounted, but I didn't care. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about principle, about finally standing up for myself, about consequences. 6 months after Christmas, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. Without my payments, my parents couldn't afford the mortgage. Jason, despite now being the legal owner, had neither the income nor the credit to refinance the loan. My phone, which I had unblocked for emergency purposes only, exploded with messages. My mother, hysterical. "They're going to take the house! How could you do this to us?" My father, threatening. "You'll regret this, Christine. Family is forever." Jason, suddenly conciliatory. "Hey sis, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Can we talk about the house situation?" I forwarded the messages to my lawyer without responding. 7 months after Christmas, I received an unexpected email from my father sent to my work address, since I had blocked his emails to my personal account. It was brief, just 3 sentences. "I know what we did was wrong. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. Can we talk, just you and me?" I stared at the message for a long time, emotions warring within me. The little girl who had always sought her father's approval wanted to respond immediately, to agree to meet, to try to repair what had been broken. But the woman I had become stronger, wiser, more self-protecting, recognized the timing for what it was. Desperation, not genuine remorse. The foreclosure was moving forward. They were about to lose the house. Of course, they wanted to talk now. I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding. "Standard tactic," he confirmed. "They're trying to negotiate directly with you because their legal position is weak. I strongly advise against any meeting without me present." I took his advice. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't agree to meet. I continued living my life, building my future, focusing on my needs for once. And I discovered something surprising. I was happier than I had been in years. Free from the constant drain of emotional and financial obligation, I flourished. My career accelerated. My social life expanded. I started sleeping better, eating better, taking better care of myself in every way. For the first time, I was putting myself first. And contrary to everything my family had implicitly taught me, it didn't make me selfish or cold or materialistic, it made me whole. The consequences. 3 months after Christmas, the case was progressing. The bank had been notified of the legal dispute and, without my payments, began the foreclosure process. That's when my family showed up at my apartment. "How could you?" my mother shouted. "The bank called. They're threatening to take the house. They said we have 90 days to resolve the situation or we'll be evicted." "This is ridiculous," my father sputtered. "You can't do this. The house is Jason's now." I remained calm. "Actually, according to our signed agreement, the house should be partly mine. You decided to ignore that when you transferred the property to Jason without my knowledge or consent, while I was still paying for it." "We'll take this to court," Jason threatened. "We've hired a specialized real estate lawyer. He says your agreement is worth nothing compared to a registered deed." "Good luck with that," I replied. "I have 8 years of banking records, receipts for all the improvements I made to the house, and our original signed agreement." In the following months, their lawyer tried various legal maneuvers. He claimed my payments were family gifts, that the agreement had been verbally superseded, even that I had agreed to the transfer in a conversation that never happened. The case dragged on for 2 more months. until their lawyer finally analyzed all the evidence during the discovery phase and realized how weak their position was. He recommended they accept a settlement. The real estate investor is still interested in buying the property, I explained when we met to negotiate. He's willing to take over the legal process and resolve this quickly. You can accept his offer, which includes enough time to find a new place, or you can wait for the bank to take the house. Your choice. We're your family, my mother pleaded. You made your choice when you transferred the house to Jason while I was still paying for it, I replied simply. Now I'm making mine. My mother's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. For a moment, I felt a pang of the old guilt, the automatic response I'd been conditioned to feel whenever my mother cried. But then I remembered the Christmas dinner, her cold eyes as she called my presence a disgrace, the casual cruelty with which she had dismissed 8 years of my financial support. The tears were tactical, not genuine. Another manipulation attempt. The investor's offer is more than fair, I continued, my voice steady. You'll have 60 days to find a new place, and you'll receive $50,000 from the sale proceeds to help with relocation costs. $50,000? Jason exploded. The house is worth at least $450,000. The house has a $320,000 mortgage balance, my lawyer interjected smoothly. After settlement costs, real estate fees, and Ms. Reynolds' court-ordered compensation for her 8 years of payments and improvements, the court determined $335,000 as fair compensation. After considering depreciation and legal adjustments, there simply isn't more to distribute. This is highway robbery, my father muttered. No, I corrected him. This is consequence. The meeting ended without resolution. They refused to sign the settlement agreement, still believing they could somehow win in court despite the overwhelming evidence against them. 2 weeks later, their lawyer contacted mine. They were ready to settle. The foreclosure timeline had accelerated, and they risked losing everything if they didn't accept the investor's offer. The paperwork was signed the following day. The house would be sold to the investor. My parents and Jason would receive $50,000 and 60 days to vacate. I would receive $335,000 as compensation for my years of payments and improvements. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about justice, about recognition of the sacrifices I had made, about consequences for the betrayal I had suffered. As I signed the final settlement agreement, I felt no joy, no vindication, no sense of victory, just a quiet relief that it was finally over. My mother called that evening, the first direct contact we'd had in months. I almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity perhaps, or the last vestiges of familial obligation made me pick up. How could you do this to your own family? She demanded without preamble. We raised you better than this. Did you? I asked quietly. You raised me to believe family meant supporting each other, that loyalty and honesty were paramount. Then you transferred the house to Jason behind my back while I was still paying the mortgage. It wasn't like that, she protested. We always intended to tell you. It just never seemed like the right time. 8 years. Mom, I paid the mortgage for 8 years. I invested over $335,000 in a house that you secretly transferred to Jason. When exactly were you planning to tell me? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a smaller voice, we thought you wouldn't mind. You've always been so generous with the family. Generous doesn't mean willing to be exploited, I replied. It doesn't mean I don't expect basic fairness and honesty. So that's it? She asked, her voice hardening again. You're throwing away your family over money? No, Mom. I'm setting boundaries after years of having them ignored. I'm demanding respect after years of being taken for granted. I'm protecting myself after years of putting everyone else first. Jason will have nowhere to go, she said, changing tactics. He can't afford his own place. He'll end up homeless. Jason is 32 years old, I reminded her. He's capable of working full-time like most adults do. The $50,000 from the settlement is more than enough for first and last month's rent, security deposit, and plenty left over. He'll be fine. You've changed, she accused. You've become cold, calculating. This isn't the daughter I raised. You're right, I agreed. I have changed. I've finally realized my worth. I've finally stopped accepting crumbs when I deserve the whole loaf. I've finally learned to say no. After a long pause, she asked, will we ever see you again? I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on whether you can accept the new boundaries I've set, whether you can respect me as an equal, not just as a resource to be used. We've always respected you, she insisted. No, Mom, you haven't, but maybe someday you will. I ended the call, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had said my piece without anger, without recrimination, without losing control. I had stated my truth calmly and clearly. Whether they chose to hear it was up to them. The rebuilding. A year has passed since that Christmas. The case was settled out of court. The judge determined that the property transfer to Jason violated the pre-existing agreement and my rights as the primary investor in the house. As resolution, the court ordered the property sold, with a defined percentage of the proceeds going to each party, recognizing my 8 years of financial contribution. The investor bought the house at a fair price, of which I received the majority as compensation for my years of payments. I used that money to put a down payment on my own home, smaller, but completely mine. Each payment goes toward my future, not to people who see me as a convenience. Those months after Christmas were filled with legal proceedings and personal growth. 3 months for negotiating the agreement, 2 months for finalizing the sale, and the rest of the year dedicated to my recovery and new beginning. The process wasn't quick or easy, but having the investor involved accelerated what could have been years of legal battles. My parents and Jason now rent a small apartment. My father had to postpone retirement. Jason finally kept a job for more than 6 months, not without difficulty. I heard he almost got fired twice before realizing there was no longer a financial safety net. Necessity, it turns out, is a powerful motivator when all other options are gone. Sometimes I receive messages from them, usually when bills are due. I maintain minimal, cordial contact. I don't hate them, but I don't trust them either. "You ruined us," my mother said the last time we spoke. "No," I replied. "I just stopped allowing you to ruin me. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it for survival." Sometimes the greatest lesson you can teach someone who abuses your generosity is simply to stop being generous. Today, I live without guilt. I've established boundaries. I've discovered who truly values me, and I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect and genuine love. My new home isn't impressive by most standards, a modest 2-bedroom condo in a quiet neighborhood, but every square inch of it is mine. I chose the paint colors, the furniture, the artwork. I make the decisions about repairs and improvements. I control who enters and who doesn't. For the first time in my adult life, I have a space that is truly mine, free from obligation or guilt or resentment. I've made new friends, genuine friends who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I've started dating again, cautiously at first, still learning to trust after years of betrayal by those who should have loved me most. I've even begun volunteering at a financial literacy program for young women, teaching them the lessons I learned too late: how to value themselves, how to set boundaries, how to recognize when generosity becomes exploitation. My career continues to flourish. Without the constant drain of financial support to my family, I've been able to invest in myself, completing that MBA I'd always wanted, attending conferences and networking events, taking professional development courses. I received another promotion 6 months ago, with a substantial raise and increased responsibilities. My father called when he heard about the promotion through a mutual acquaintance. "I always knew you'd go far," he said, as if he'd been supporting my career all along instead of treating it as an inconvenience to the family. "I'm proud of you, Christine." Once those words would have meant everything to me. I would have clung to them, treasured them, used them to justify years of sacrifice and neglect. Now I simply said, "Thank you," and changed the subject. I still see them occasionally, holidays, mostly, at neutral locations like restaurants where everyone is on their best behavior. The relationship is different now. Cordial but distant. Polite but guarded. They've changed too in small ways. My mother is less demanding, more careful with her words. My father asks about my work with what seems like genuine interest. Jason has maintained steady employment for almost a year now, though he still complains about his boss, his hours, his pay. Are these changes genuine or strategic? I don't know, I don't need to know. What matters is that I no longer depend on their approval or validation. I no longer measure my worth by their assessment of me. I measure it by my own standards, by the quality of my work, by the authenticity of my relationships, by the peace I feel when I come home to my own space at the end of the day. The money was never the point. It was substantial. $335,000 is nothing to dismiss, but it wasn't about the dollars and cents. It was about what that money represented. Years of sacrifice, of putting others first, of believing promises that were never intended to be kept. Recovering that investment was a way of reclaiming my power, of saying, I matter. My contributions matter. My trust matters. Last week, I hosted a dinner party in my new home. Among the guests was Sophia, who had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal. As we cleared dishes together in the kitchen, she squeezed my shoulder and whispered, I told you that you deserved more. I smiled, knowing she had been right all along. The hardest lesson was learning that family, true family, isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by mutual respect, by reciprocity, by genuine care for each other's well-being. My parents and brother failed that definition. They saw me as a resource, not a person. They valued what I could provide, not who I was. So I've built a new family of friends, of colleagues, of mentors and mentees, and people who see me clearly and value me authentically. People who give as well as take, who support as well as seek support. Looking around the table at the smiling faces of people who genuinely care about me, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced at my parents' house. This is what family should feel like. I realized this is what I deserved all along. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Your worth is not measured by what you can give others. Your value is not determined by how much you sacrifice. You deserve respect, appreciation, and reciprocity. And if the people who should love you most can't or won't provide that, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to put yourself first. Because in the end, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to say, enough. I deserve more. And I will accept nothing less. If this story resonated with you, share it. Because somewhere, someone is unnecessarily sacrificing for people who will never value that sacrifice. And that person needs to hear, you deserve more.